being a little bit creative in those practices of how do we get the most out of 17 kids on one court? How do we make sure that we don't have a ton of standing around, but we're not jumping our kids to the point where they're not good tomorrow? And so I think part of that comes from having conversations like, where are we at?
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will help you get better at teaching and leading so that you can develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Coach Lorelle Hoyer. She's the head women's volleyball coach at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, or IUP. She has over a decade of experience coaching volleyball from the youth levels all the way up through the Division I level. In part 2 of our conversation, we talk about her rules of thumb for practice design, how to keep it fun for athletes, and the importance of lifelong learning. If you enjoyed this episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, which consist of detailed notes on each episode, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode. And I'm really excited to announce the first annual Cutting Edge Coaching Summer Coaching Series, or SCS. The SCS includes 10 weekly presentations plus 2 bonus sessions with coaches and experts from across sports that are going to help you grow as a coach by giving you practical ideas you can apply in your coaching. The Summer Coaching Series begins June 1st and will consist of weekly sessions through the first week of August. When you sign up for the SCS, you'll get access to the live presentations and Q&As, the video replays, a private podcast feed of audio-only replays that you can listen to from anywhere, detailed coaching notes on each session, and more. We've got an incredible lineup of guests that you can check out at summercoachingseries.com. The early bird price of $127 runs through May 9th, then the price goes up to $147. We're offering a 100% money-back guarantee for coaches if they're not satisfied with the value they received within the first 2 weeks. You can learn more about the speakers, topics, and presentation times, and or sign up at summercoachingseries.com, or just click the link in the show details. And if you're not sure if the Summer Coaching Series would be right for you, I'm giving away free access to a previous coaching Zoom I held with Lemov. If you'd like to get access to that coaching Zoom, learn more about the Summer Coaching Series, or sign up, you can find all of that at summercoachingseries.com. Now to part 2 of my conversation with Coach Hoyer. Enjoy the episode. Let's talk a little bit more about practice planning. I think you were sharing some insightful things there just around, one of the challenges of practice. I love the way you said it, is that we want to move quickly enough that we don't lose their attention or let them slip into that place of boredom where they're really not engaged in learning, but we don't want to move so quickly that they don't learn and get it. So talk more about that balance, and maybe what are some things that you guys in the program that you assist with do to try to, walk that line?
Yeah. First off, I've learned a lot trial and error for my husband, so I have to give him credit because he's been doing this way longer than I have. And so I'm grateful that I've got to learn from his mistakes and grow with him throughout all of this. But I think some of the things that I've really tried to focus on, and it's a balance of learning from the college level as well as from the club level. I went from coaching 11 twos, also coaching kids that are going to end up being an All-American at the same time, and then jumped back into the college game. And so it was like, okay, how do I take everything I've learned and make sure that I continue to do the things I'm good at and get better at the things I'm not? And so specifically looking more, I think it works at both a high school level as well as a college level. But never, kind of the rules I sort of go by is we're never doing anything more than 20 minutes unless we're playing a game with a score that goes past that 20 minutes. Taking drills that work on the same things, or to its core kind of the same things, but also have different parts of it. So a 5-on-5 game that can evolve to a 4-on-4, or can go into has the same concept of a 6-on-6 with people changing roles. Things that just can be edited a little bit so it's not the same. I've walked twice in my career, I've walked into programs, and as I come into them and start to get to know their kids, they're like, we did the same drills every day. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, no, we would do OWD every day. And I was like, oh goodness gracious. Like, I wouldn't want to do that as a coach. I would hate to do the same thing every day. I'd get bored. Um, so it's kind of that balance between, taking those drills that you can edit a little bit, and then so that they still seem fresh. So we're not doing the same thing every day, but we're finding a way to build on what we're getting better at, I think, and structuring your practices in a way that makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish, but also who you are as a coach and what your team is. You know, in my previous job, the three of us that worked together, really close, known each other for 10 years, like very, very close. And so we all had similar things that were important to us. Like learning was super important to us. Giving the kids a voice was super important to us. We had different technical things we were good at, but like, how do we then build on those different things and how do we evolve through? So we had a framework in which our basis was like, we do this, we do a warm up, and then we do a skill, and then we do a, competitive thing, but the components within that change. And I think one of the things that I really took from, and I think one of the things I love about coaching is the creativeness that comes with it. I've realized in the last 2 years how much I love creating in different ways, right? How I like coming up with a product. And so being a little bit creative in those practices of how do we get the most out of 17 kids on one court? How do we make sure that we don't have a ton of standing around, but we're not jumping our kids to the point where they're not good tomorrow? And so I think part of that comes from having conversations like, where are we at? We did a preseason one year where before every practice, the kids rated how their bodies were feeling, upper body and lower body, on like a soreness scale. So we could come in and be like, oh, we're really not great at this, right? Like, we're really sore. Our shoulders are bad. Kids aren't going to put balls in. Coaches are only going to put balls in. We would change practices in that way to fit their body. And in a long college season, those things are important. And so being able to do that and then finding out from the kids as you evolve and build those relationships, what drills do you like? What drills do you not like? And not that means we're never going to do those drills. But if I know there's something that you really like, obviously I'm bringing the drill in because I think it has a purpose. Let's do that a little bit more. Let's give you a little bit of voice. If I know you hate a drill, let's explain why we do it so that maybe you don't like it, so you don't hate it as much. But and we as coaches know, like, okay, we had a bad practice yesterday, or kids' feet look like they're not really into it. Like, let's not do a drill that we know isn't going to emotionally be beneficial for them. Because there is that balance between, are we learning? Are we growing? Are we physically taking care of them? But are we being aware of their emotional state so that we're getting the most out of them physically and mentally within the practice blocks we're allowed?
One of the things that I really liked that you shared was what you mentioned about one of the staffs that you were on and just kind of the framework that you guys had that you followed pretty consistently. I think that it's important for coaching staffs, especially, to sync up and be on the same page around practice planning and design and like what your different sections of practice are for and what the flow of them is going to be like. One of my other favorite interviews that I've done was with Mike McKay. He's a basketball coach in Canada, just a really sharp guy. And he just shared this TLC framework, stands for teaching, learning, and competing. And something that he's implemented and helped coaches implement, and just really simple. And the main reason for it is like, let's make sure that every coach in the gym is on the same page with what we're doing now, why we're doing it, and the flow of it. So like a teaching drill is one where you can stop it at any point to correct or highlight the agreed upon focus on our practice plan. A learning drill is, we're playing some variation of the game and we're going to do more coaching on the fly. We might only stop it if we see the same error multiple times, and then we might pause it to give quick feedback and get them playing again quickly. And then a competing drill is it's the game. We're playing volleyball, we're playing basketball, and we're keeping score, and we're doing maybe similar coaching that we would do in a game, or maybe we're not doing much of any coaching, we're just observing, right? And so I think that what you highlighted there is important, or framework like I just shared, having some sort of framework for your practice planning to help you clarify it, help the assistants in your practice know, this is what we're going for now is really important. Do you have any other thoughts on that or anything else you would want to share about the framework you guys used?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, coaching is teaching. At least I very much believe, right? And I have a background in nonprofit education before I got into coaching. And when you're when you're making your plan to teach, when you're doing this, you have the parts that science has told us are the best way for kids to learn, right? Is a warm up and then you build on it throughout. And I think practices are the same. Athletes want the consistency. We also want to build on things. Why would we do something different in the gym, which we think is a learning environment, than they would do in a classroom? When we're both teaching, we're just teaching in different ways, right? And so I think that that's something that is super important to me, is like, are we building through or going? Is there a sequence that makes sense? Do our kids know what to expect every day? Because there's a comfort in that. I think things that I've also learned that are super important is no matter what people say, life does not stop when a kid walks in the gym. Whatever's happened before the day, good day, bad day, all of that, they're carrying that emotional baggage into the gym. It's going to take them a while to emotionally and mentally walk away from what the rest of their day has been to invest in here. And so, in some of the best programs I've been, that first 10 minutes that the kids or the athletes are in the gym, that's almost a social period in a sense. Like, okay, they're warming up, but they're talking with each other. We're checking in with them. It's very informal. It's giving them a buffer to sort of transition from their regular day into their gym day. And then meeting as a group before we get into the nitty-gritty and connecting everyone together, because so far everybody's kind of been doing their own thing. They've been warming up, they've been chatting with this person, they've been this, that, and whatever. Okay, now we need to come together. Let's talk about what our goals are for the day. Let's talk about what our focus is. Let's look at what we're going to do for the day. Do we have any questions? And then let's move into what we're going to do and how that's going to work, and how we can sort of mold the best parts of what we're trying to accomplish as a staff, well as still having the athletes feel like they're important and they're invested and their opinion matters. And I think sometimes the hardest time to do that is when you make a dramatic change. So between year 2 and 3, I want to say, or 1 and 2, we changed what our warm up and practice looked like. As coaches, like in volleyball, everybody starts off peppering, pass that hit with a partner type thing. Driving us nuts as coaches because we were creating bad habits, because all the things that we were working on in practice wasn't translating to that time, because to them it was just warm up time. We're like, well, if we're going to warm up, let's warm up in a way that's reestablishing the technique, the skills, the standards that we want. And so we took out peppering altogether, and we did what we called a checklist, where each position had a checklist of things they needed to get through that also matched with warm up type activities, so that they were getting the warm up that they wanted. We were getting them to practice proper technique instead of just doing something because they'd already done it. And making that change was a little difficult. And so we had to have a lot of conversations of why we were making it, the benefit of it. And then some days having a little leeway where we did just let them pepper or just do some of those things that they enjoyed. So again, both sides were getting what they needed for us to be as successful as we possibly could be.
A couple things I think are worth highlighting there. The first, I agree with you. Coaching is teaching. One of the things you mentioned at the beginning of what you shared there is the importance of review, is essentially what you're getting at. Like, your lesson should often start with review. I think that's so important. Like, we should review more often. Whatever sport you coach, whatever you're doing, like, start teaching less new things and start reviewing what you've done more so that they actually learn it. And then what you said there too is so important. Like, it's got to build sequentially. Whatever we're teaching them, whatever we're doing, it needs to build in a sequence. And for that to happen, we've got to start with the end in mind. So we have to start with the end, plan it back from there, and then build it in a sequence for them, right? Whether those are your principles of play, or the different plays or actions you're running in your sport, whatever it is, it needs to build sequentially. And the last thing that I think is so important in what you shared is just the power and importance of routines. And, I've been learning so much even this last year, just brain science, cognitive science, and, to combat stress and anxiety that so many of our athletes are experiencing on a daily level. Routines are incredibly powerful to fight that. Routines reduce anxiety. They know what to expect when they show up to the gym. And I think it's really important for us to consider that if we really want to have a practice where we get the best out of them and the best out of the entire group. I think we should be really intentional with some routines, whether that's your warm-up routine, whether that's the way once you start practice, you have a routine, a meeting routine, whatever it is. Like, figure out some important routines that you can implement that reinforce your culture, your way of doing things, and hopefully really reduce some anxiety for your athletes. Two more quick things I want to hit on. The next one is just having fun. I know that's something that you care about. I am guessing that Division I volleyball, like, it's competitive. Obviously, you guys are trying to win. Sports in general can just be high anxiety environments. So talk about the importance of having fun. How do you actually ensure that it's still fun despite the competition and the pressure that often everybody's feeling?
Yeah. So I think the first step before you even get to the fun part is having trusting relationships, but having open, honest conversation with kids about where we are as a team and where we're going, where they are as individuals and where you see them going, because that takes a little bit of the anxiety off. Like, we're all open with each other. We all know where we're at, whether we like what we heard or not. We're there, because that takes a little bit away from there of those feelings of anxiety and stress. They're always going to be there in a way, because the nature of sports, especially at the collegiate level, is to be competitive and is to win. So you're always going to have a little bit of that. But to really, make the most of it, having those conversations from the start of the standards of the program, of where you're going as a team, where individuals are going, are all super important, because it lets everybody know where they sit within the program. But I don't ever want to dread practice. I don't ever want to dread going to work, and I don't ever want my athletes to feel that way. And I've been in programs where that's happened, right? You head coaches get in a routine, and as an assistant coach, your voices get smaller and smaller throughout, and that's the nature of the game in some places. But we all start off playing because we love it. Or we start playing because somebody forces us to play it, and then we grow to love it, which is why we're still playing it. Because I definitely thought volleyball was the stupidest sport ever, because I didn't get to punch anybody. I was a very aggressive basketball player, which is why they moved me away from people. And I thought volleyball was so dumb. Like, I had to be bribed into it. And then I really got into it, and I was like, oh, this is so great. Takes the things I'm good at and makes me better at them. Like, awesome. And nobody wants to do something they hate every day, or something they're not having fun with. And that's how we all start. So although college athletics is super competitive and our jobs depend on if we win or lose, you're going to win more and you're going to get more out of your kids if you're having fun. And, for me, early on in my career, I was like, I don't understand coaches that play music in practice. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's not focused. Now I don't ever want to work in a gym that doesn't have music, because it changes the energy, right? And it brings this great vibe. And one of my favorite things still to this day is watching film with a kid. Again, at one of my previous institutions, we're in music all the time. And you'd be watching film with a kid, and then all of a sudden, a coach would go talk to a kid, and you've got 3 other kids that are kind of like having a dance party over here. Because they're just waiting till the instruction's done, and there's joy that comes in that, right? And you can look at it and you can be like, oh, they're not focused. Oh, they're not this. They're having fun. And fun is really important. Kids that are having fun are going to play harder. Kids that are having a good experience are going to work harder. They're going to do the extra stuff. They're going to give you a little bit more. So creating that fun is going to make you more competitive. Your kids are going to learn more. How many of us like have a favorite subject because it was fun, because the teacher made it fun, not because of what it actually was, right? A lot of people don't like math or don't like the sciences because they don't think it's fun or it's hard. And it can be fun when it's brought to you in the right light. And so I think that's the same thing with coaching, is that fun is important. It builds relationships too. It builds memories. And at the end of the day, yeah, we're here to win volleyball matches. We're here to represent our university. But going back, we're here to also positively impact these student athletes for the rest of their life. And like that fun is important. And so I think speaking a little bit to what you were saying about like, how do you do that? Right. And music was something that was really big in one of the places that I worked. Like it made the environment better. Doing things like switching up drills in a way that make it fun. So we bought at one point a like 21-sided die. And so we would we'd use it as a serving thing, but we would roll the dice, and whoever jersey number came up, like they had to go do the serving. Cause then it's fun. Everybody's like, ooh, is it me? Is it not going to be me? What's happening there? And it's saying, oh, you have to go do this. It's like the die told you that you are going to be our serving person today. So I think, there's things like that. Using drills that encourage fun a little bit, right? In different ways. And that can look differently, whether it's taking, there's a game that a lot of people have used in volleyball. It's a scavenger hunt or a bingo where you have to do so many things and get to 25 to win. And the other team doesn't know what you have. So it's competitive. As coaches, we can put on there, like, we need to work on tipping. So one of the things is like, you have to score on a tip, or we need to defend this set. So if you dig transition, when the other team hits this set and you score, you get 2 points. Things like that incorporate what we need to work on, but also make it not punitive or like you have to do this or we have to work on that. And I think being realistic in the gym, that like it's not always going to be great. It's not always going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly sometimes, and being okay with that. And we're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay. If we have that mentality of like, this is going to happen and it's going to be okay, it kind of also builds on the fun because it takes away that stress and anxiety. For us to be successful, to get where we want, we're going to fail, and we're going to fail a lot. And if we're going to fail right now, let's fail big. Like, go hard, figure it out, find out where your ceiling is. It's going to be okay. Now, if we start making errors and we start failing because we're scared, because we're not going for it, then we need to address that. But if you go up and you go big and that ball ends up 8 rows up because you were going to try something that didn't work out, all right, well, maybe we know that, like, let's try for row 6 instead of row 8 next time. And let's like work through that. And that brings the fun to it. Being not always having to be so serious, laughing when we do something stupid, because we're gonna do stuff stupid, have a little bit of, I don't like to use the word like smack talk because I think there's a negative connotation to that, but a little bit like, oh, you got me, I got you next time. How do you build that camaraderie, I think, and that communication, and that makes it fun. And I think you can also do that if you build those relationships, if you set the goals and the parameters for all those things early on, because it's not always going to be rainbows and sunshine and butterflies. You're going to have practices that are bad practices. You're going to have practices where they end up not being fun. Kids are having a hard time. Coaches are having a hard time. We're all just having a bad day. That happens. And that's okay if we come back the next day and we learn and grow from it. and putting in at least a foundation of ways that we can have fun and we can make it enjoyable is going to make those hard days not as terrible because there are going to be good things that we can take from it.
That's really good. I love some of those things you shared there. One of the things I was just thinking as you were talking, one of the ways that we can make practice more fun is just to play the game sometimes. Oftentimes, I don't think we play the game enough. And like we talked at the beginning, like the reason we started playing these sports is because they were fun, and playing is fun. And play in your practices. Like you said, to get creative with constraints, to emphasize different things, to increase that engagement, to make it more fun. So I love those things you shared there. Last question for you, and then a couple rapid fire questions. Talk for a couple minutes about the importance of lifelong learning, and just kind of what's your process like for growing and getting better as a coach?
Yeah, so I would say probably about 6, 7 years ago, maybe like from year like 7 to year 4 of coaching, um, or in the last 4 to 7 years, I got really stagnant. I would only go quote unquote learn when I had a problem or when I needed a solution to a drill or a skill that wasn't going well. And so I wasn't in my mind at that time. I thought I was, growth mindset, and I thought I was a lifelong learner. And sort of as I continued to go through my evolution as a coach, I was like, no, that's just problem solving. That's not learning. There are very different things there, right? And so I started to sort of branch out, especially in the last 2.5 years, which COVID also helped with that because we all had a little bit more time, especially not being able to go out to recruit, not being able to be in the gym and that sort of stuff. And so I started reading more. I started branching out into areas that I hadn't branched out before. And for me, it started off as like I was going on Twitter, weirdly enough, and like just finding people that were tweeting things that I liked, and then following women's leaders groups and women's in sports and other coaching blogs and just all these different things. And then from there, taking things that they were looking at and they were reading and books that they suggested. And somebody liked something from somebody. And so I go look at that and I just kind of started to read things and podcasts and things I wasn't really aware of. And then as I sort of reflected on that, I'm like, how can I expect my athletes to be lifelong learners? How can I encourage them and tell them to do that if I'm not modeling that in my day to day? If they don't see me reading while we're on planes, if they don't see me talking about the things, if I'm not sharing resources that I've learned that could benefit them, I can't expect that from them. And I think that's, again, where we get stagnant as coaches, as people. We don't evolve because we get stuck in our own little silo. And so it took me longer than I would like to admit to get there. But I really just was like, I need to do this for me, and not just as a coach, but as a person, as a wife, as a stepmom, as a dog mom, as a colleague, all those things. And wanted to find a way to really better myself and grow. And then also add that in to career wise, like, how am I going to continue to move forward? How am I going to put myself in a position to have my own program at one time, to do all those things that I think are in my future if I'm just sitting here, got my nose in my laptop, recruiting this and that, and not growing as a person?
That's so good. And it's something that I've come back to in a lot of the conversations that I've had with coaches. But I just think the reality is, if we are asking our athletes to stretch and grow, we've got to model it, just like you were saying there too. So I think that's so important, and props to you for going on that journey, and even an uncomfortable one where you're like, man, I thought I was this, but I really wasn't. And so I think that is definitely admirable. I've got 3 quick rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up. The first one is this: the most fun part of coaching is?
Being with the athletes, by far. I love volleyball. I think it's the greatest game on earth. I love being with the kids more. And that's why I coach, is because I get to spend every day, well, mostly every day, with really awesome 18 to 22-year-olds. And when I'm not with them, I'm talking to really awesome 16 to 18-year-olds. And I love that part of it.
That's awesome. I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
That I actually didn't know anything, and that's okay. I think coming in, there's always this idea like you're a coach, you're supposed to know everything and this and that. First off, we don't know anything. Like, at least for me, like I feel like I'm always now trying to evolve and learn and get better and do the best I can. And there was just this pressure when I first started coaching that like you needed to know everything. And you don't learn all those things until you do this for a really long time. Right. And so I think I wish I would have known that like it's okay to not know what I don't know. And I'll learn it. And to also feel confident in what I do know, because there's value to that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. It's okay. I think that's the most powerful part of what you just shared. It's okay to not have all the answers. Here's my last one. I know I'm successful as a coach when
I don't have to coach. When my kids feel and my athletes feel validated and confident and strong enough that I can sit back, they don't need me. Whether that is on the court, in a practice, in life. They've kind of gotten to the point where they've figured it out, and know I'll always be there, but they don't need me, and I can allow them to kind of run with it on their own because they have the skills and resources to do that.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and thanks again to Coach Hoyer for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and you want to grab a copy of the podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast. I've got 2 takeaways from this episode. First are the practice design rules of thumb she shared. If we all put a 20-minute time limit on our games or drills, used platform games or games that can be easily adapted, as she called them, and considered the powerful questions she mentioned about adjusting our practices, what's their state and what do they need, I think we'd all improve our practices and ultimately our players' growth. Second is a quote from Coach Hoyer on fun. She said, "I don't ever want to dread practice. I don't ever want to dread going to work. And I don't ever want my athletes to feel that way." This doesn't mean that we don't take practice seriously and that we're not competitive. It just means that we recognize that at the core, we all began playing, and I believe that we continue to play or coach because it's fun, because there is or should be joy in it. It looks different at different ages and stages, but I believe we should all be prioritizing fun with our teams. And hey, coaches, don't forget to learn more or sign up for the first annual Summer Coaching Series at summercoachingseries.com. It's going to help you develop better players and teams and make a greater impact on your athletes. The early bird price runs through May 9th, so learn more or sign up today at summercoachingseries.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.